Irashaimase! Hello and welcome to Fataris' Kitchen. I'm your host, Chef Fataris. It's time once again for Shoot 'em Up Saturday, and on the menu this Saturday we have Flying Red Barrel, a cute shoot 'em up that recently was remastered for its Steam release. What kind of taste will it have? Let's get cooking and find out. From developer Orange Juice, Flying Red Barrel released for PCs in 2007. In 2009, it received its first English localization, courtesy of Rocking Android. And now, in 2020, it's available on Steam, courtesy of Fruit Bat Factory. So the Steam version remasters the graphics, increasing the overall resolution of the game, as well as adding a few other quality of life improvements. The game itself has a really great scoring mechanic and awesome replayability. There are a total of 18 different endings you can aim for. So here we are at the main menu, so we can dive into the gameplay itself. There are two ways that we can look at the gameplay. There's the practice mode, where you can play a stage you've previously unlocked to practice it, or of course the shooting mode, which is your main play. Selecting shooting takes us to the difficulty selection: novice, intermediate, and advanced, or an easier way to look at it, easy, normal, and hard. Starting the gameplay, you see us flying the cute little flying red barrel that's in the title. So we play the character of Mark in this story that involves aviation, organization called the Guild, and air pirates. And of course that's very critical in a game that actually has that many storied endings. The mechanics, though, are for the most part relatively basic. We have a shot which is a burst fire, so if I press the button we get a barrage of shots that'll eventually come to an end. That's kind of useful, because if you're not constantly firing, you'll be sucking in the coins that enemies drop when they're destroyed. However, if we hold down the fire button, we activate kind of a focused movement. So you'll see that there's a red dot that appears in the middle of the plane once I hold my fire button down long enough. And that allows us to see our hitbox, as well as control our movement between enemy shots a little more finely, which is important in a game that is a bullet hell. As in the later stages, even as early as stage 2, there gets to be quite a bit to dodge. So in addition to our shot and that focus movement, we also have missiles, and the missiles are very critical for the scoring element of the game. So every time we fire a missile and hit an enemy, it increases the multiplier that's displayed in the top left. The multiplier decays over a period of time, but if you learn to control your missile usage, then it's actually possible to build up the multiplier quite fast. It starts at ×2, then it goes ×3, ×4, etc., etc., all the way up to ×16. Those multipliers increase the score we get, but it also increases the amount of coins the enemies drop when they're defeated. And the coins that the enemies drop is crucial, because the coins refill our missiles. So the more coins we get, the more missiles we get, the more missiles we get, the more coins we get, and the higher score we can achieve. So that whole scoring combo system is a really neat little feature of this game. So here we are at a sub-boss that happens to come right before the main stage boss. One thing that's important to note is elements like this actually play a part in the endings we can get from the game itself. So in the case of this particular boss here, if we destroy it, then that'll set certain flags which will set us on one ending or another. So there's an ending that we're on if we don't set any flags, but there are also endings that we can get by achieving certain flags. So if we destroy that sub-boss in a certain way, or say this boss in a certain fashion, then that will change the possible endings that we can get. It's a really neat little system. The boss fights themselves are a great opportunity for high scores, as the decay rate of the combo meter feels a little bit slower, and between phases the combo meter does not decay, so that's important to note. I accidentally ran out of missiles, so let's see if we can build things up a little bit. The boss fights are multi-stage, so I do really appreciate that, and you can see the various individual segments that the bosses have. So you can continue to build up our meter while we destroy those enemy sections. As you can see, we're up to times 16 multiplier, although this boss is just about done for. Note to self, don't stand right in front of the giant cannon, it will hurt you. So by default we have 3 continues that give us 3 lives each. It is possible to earn additional lives by scoring high enough, so keep that in mind. The first stage is clear. Here we have a couple options. We can let this particular enemy escape, or we can shoot down his ship. You get a little bit of dialogue between the two characters there. Our character, Mark, on the left, and the other characters that she happens to be talking to on the right. Now, the best I've ever done is a rank 1 star. If you're really good using the combo system, you can rack up ridiculous amounts of coins and points. So it's definitely something to aim for. In fact, there's actually a little demo that if you leave the game playing at sitting at the main menu, that will come up that basically shows you just how insane and how large some of the multipliers can quickly get. Here trying to emulate some of that and not doing too hot. So that's what we have as far as the basics for Flying Red Barrel. So far, it's one that I've quite enjoyed, but one thing I do have to admit, this is on novice difficulty, and the game itself is actually fairly difficult. So that's one thing that you might want to take into consideration. It's not one that I feel is very friendly to people who aren't familiar with bullet hell shoot-'em-ups. So that could be something that might dissuade you from picking up this particular title. If you're interested, it is still possible to check out the original English localization from Rockin' Android. That version is available on Amazon, but at least from my experience, I played both in the lead up to this release, and I had some issues, particularly with controls and the controller that I generally use for my PC gameplay not working properly. It was like the input was being delayed. The movement felt really staggered. In a gameplay that depends on fine reflexes, that was a big problem. That said, it was still playable enough, and using other control schemes or maybe a different type of input, you might have an easier time playing that original version of Flying Red Barrel. So, at the end of the day, the plus flavors for this title. So the minus flavors that I have are the game itself is just a little bit too difficult to make itself easily accessible for people who aren't big fans of bullet hell shoot-'em-ups. But then on the and also there's for a game that has such a great scoring mechanic, I was really hoping that the remaster would have some sort of online leaderboard. But unfortunately that is not the case, so there is that to take into consideration. On the plus side though, so there is that great scoring mechanic that I talked about. Although I haven't showed it off extremely well in this particular video, I do really love the challenge of building up the multiplier using your missiles and continuing to perpetuate that both against bosses and the enemies themselves. There's also the multiple endings. So although I haven't achieved any of the endings yet myself, the prospect and the thought of having that many different endings to work on is awesome. And there are guides available online to help you find those endings if that's something that you're looking for to achieve all those endings. And it's also in the leaderboards, or the rankings rather, on the game itself. It is possible to track all those endings. And then lastly, the last plus flavor I have for the title, it just is a cute little shoot 'em up. I hesitate to call it a shoot 'em up, but really at its core that kind of is what the gameplay is. Although it's a bullet hell, it still has a fair side of shoot 'em up to it. So there you have it. Flying Red Barrel served up for your enjoyment. So if you're a fan of bullet hell shoot 'em ups with some great scoring mechanics, or if you happen to like the work of the developer Orange Juice, then I feel like this is one that would be worth your time to check out. Well, that'll just about wrap it up for this week's episode of Shoot 'em Up Saturday. As always, I want to thank you so much for coming out and joining me this week, and I look forward to seeing you again next week.